Hi, everybody. Welcome to Explore and Traverse. My name is Mike. I'll be your host for the show. Today, we're going to be talking about backpacking gear and what you need on your first backpacking trip or your first camping trip or maybe your next camping trip and all the gear you would need to take it away from your car on the trail and camp overnight. One of the first items I'd like to talk about is your backpack, but you're also going to need a sleeping bag, a tent, a sleeping pad. We're going to talk about clothing. We're also going to talk about water filtration. We're going to talk about the water you might need and carry, the food, lighting sources, stoves. We're going to talk about med kits, tools, your personal hygiene, and different types of food you might bring. The first thing that I usually consider is weight. I don't want to be carrying anything that's going to be heavy, so we're going to go over all this gear, how much it weighs, and how to kind of minimize that. The other thing is pack size, because all this needs to fit into here. The other thing we're going to talk about as well is comfort, usually related to sleeping bags and sleeping pads, as well as your pack. We're going to talk about price as well. Price is kind of important, especially when you're first starting and buying gear. You don't want to spend $2,000 on all this stuff when you probably could be spending 500 to 600 or even less. So always remember to borrow your friend's gear. That works out just fine. The other thing we're going to be talking about is durability and weather resistance. So some of this stuff might not be as durable. You're going to buy it, it's going to break out really quick. And the other thing is weather resistance. You're not going to want a tent that leaks. So let's just jump right into it and talk about the first thing you should purchase. And I think that's going to be your pack. The reason why you're going to buy a pack over anything else first is this should be specialized and fitted to you. This should be the thing that you're going to be carrying, and it should be comfortable, but it should also carry everything you need. So when it comes to packs, usually you're going to find something between 35 liters and 50 liters for your first overnight backpacking trip. The reason why I say 50 liters is most of the stuff you first purchase is going to be bigger. However, I can usually fit everything into a 38-liter pack for most overnights that are 1 to 2 days. Anything that goes into like 3 days, you might need a 55, 60-liter pack to fit food and all your extra belongings, including clothes. The other thing you're going to look at too is durability. Packs tend to be the thing that's beat up the most, the external thing. You also want to make sure that they have great features. So like, for example, this one has a brain that has 2 pouches, one up top, one down below. It has a bottom pouch for storage. It also has side pouches, a front pouch, and it has comfortable hip belts with pouches there as well. It has side straps, and if I wanted to, I can adjust it to fit me accordingly, and I can add myself a water bladder in there. That way, if I get to a water source, I don't have to take my water bladder out of my pack and unload things. I can just take it directly out of the back. It's very good. And I actually have an Osprey. I love my Osprey. This was like one of my first purchases 5 years ago. And the other thing is, it's still pretty functional. The only other thing that I have about it that's a little off is the front mesh is a little worn. But I mean, with 5 years of use, you're gonna have that. And Osprey has a great return policy, as well as they'll fix the gear if something's breaking that shouldn't be. Another type of pack that you could also purchase is REI. They have great packs that are about 35 liters as well. The Traverse, it's about $20 cheaper. I love my Osprey because it's durable, but you can also get, say, a Trailblazer. So let's talk about sleeping bags. You're going to find 2 major types of sleeping bags when you look. You're going to find down and synthetic. They both have pros to them. I have a down bag here, and the reason why I have a down bag is because it's typically warmer, packs down smaller. If it gets wet, it dries quicker. And the other thing too is it's biodegradable, pretty eco-friendly. The other bag that you can get is a synthetic bag. You can also find synthetic down mixes. Those are great as well. But synthetics tend to stay warmer when they're wet. They don't fluff down. They're usually cheaper, so as a first purchase, that's what people tend to go to. And the other thing about it too is it's easy to clean. I'm recommending a down, but your first is probably going to be synthetic. They tend to be bigger, heavier, and harder to pack, but they're cheaper, so most people go synthetic. The other thing to look at too when it comes to bags is the EN rating. The EN rating is the warmth, basically, what it can take. So this 20-degree EN rated bag will be comfortable, well, not comfortable, it'll keep me alive at 20 degrees. There is also a comfort rating that's a little bit warmer, and I recommend you stick with that comfort rating. before the Ian rating, especially on your first hike, I'd actually recommend that you go a little bit warmer. So if this Ian rating is, say, 32 for a 20-degree bag, I'm probably not going to camp my first time in 32-degree weather. I'm probably going to make it 40. And that's just so you can be safe, because we all differ. This 20-degree bag will keep me alive at 20 degrees, but you might also be miserable. So just remember, you have to also figure out your own body and what's comfortable for you. Previously, all bag companies just had their own rating system. They would just say it takes 20 degrees. And another company, which is not as good, can say 20 degrees as well. So just make sure that you're doing what you can to be safe out there. I'm using the Climate KSB 20. I love that bag. It's great. It's pretty inexpensive compared to most bags, but you can find some REI brand, or I actually have an Enlightened Equipment quilt that I also bring, which is about half the size and a quarter of the weight. I love this thing. And you can find ones that are even cheaper than that. Just remember that when you go cheaper, it's going to get bigger and heavier. So the first place that I would pack this in my pack, because we need to be organized, is I'm going to put this in the bottom of my pack. Although I can put it down here, I'm going to put it within the main compartment. I actually put other things down here that are easier to get and things that I need first. Sleeping bag and tent are typically the last things you need, as well as your sleeping pad. So that goes in first. Also, the heaviest thing should go towards the bottom. It's the best place to keep it so that your hips are maintaining most of your weight and it's not your shoulders. So let's put our sleeping bag in. So the next topic we're going to talk about is your sleeping pad. There's two different types. You have closed-cell foam and inflatable. The most important thing that you're going to look at is the R value. What's the R value? So the R value is about how warm it's going to be. Usually summer season will take a R value of 1. Shoulder seasons like fall and winter, you can get up to 2. The edge of the shoulder seasons are R values of 3. Winter is usually 4. A very bad winter is usually about 5. And mountaineering is usually 5+. This is an R value of 4.5. And I like inflatables. However, you can also buy closed-cell foam. These are the two different types of sleeping pads. You have inflatables, you have closed-cell foams. Benefits of the inflatable is it's lightweight, it's packable, and guess what? It'll keep you warmer. Closed-cell foam can go to, it's usually about R value of 2. It varies, some are just 1. And it doesn't get small, so you're gonna have to strap it to the outside of your bag. However, it's never gonna pop at night. Good thing about inflatables is they typically have pads that you can patch up any type of hole in there. Problem is, at 2 in the morning, that's not gonna be a fun task to do. However, I still prefer this and the risk of it. So let's put closed-cell foam down. The other thing about sleeping pads that you're also gonna look at is the features. Some crinkle, most people don't like that. Others have headrests, which is great, or side rails so you don't fall off at night. This one's pretty basic, and you're gonna find it for about 80 bucks. The closed-cell one down there is only about 30, which is great. And some people even use yoga mats in the summer for $10. So if you're going camping in the summer, I'm not gonna recommend a yoga mat, but I'm also not opposed to it. And since this is a little bit heavier and it's the last thing we use, I'm gonna put it right next to my sleeping pad. So let's talk about your next big purchase, which is going to be the tent. And that's probably going to be your most important purchase besides the bag, because you're going to buy something that's specific to your needs. This is a 2-person tent. I like actually hiking solo with my 2-person tent. Really comfortable. But the other thing you're going to look at too is space. So if you buy a 3-person tent for yourself, just remember you're carrying that 3-person tent and every pound matters. The thing I like about this tent is it's only about 2.5 pounds. It's the Big Sky Soul XP2. I love this tent. My first tent I bought from Target, and as you can tell, is a bit bigger. The features that you're really going to look at, besides weight, are also going to be things like its weather resistance, its how easy it is to set up. The other thing you're going to look at too is the features such as pockets, vents. Vents are huge, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. It gets really wet, and without those vents, you will wake up in a puddle because all that water comes straight down the exterior of the tent and into the basin. So let's talk about putting away your tent and where you're going to put it. I tend to put my tent down in the bottom compartment where the sleeping bag usually goes. The reason for that is when I get to my campsite, I want to be able to access my tent first and get that set up, especially if it's raining or has been wet. It's good to get this out first, and that's usually where I prefer it. The other thing is, since your tent is typically one of your heavier items, it's down low. It's in the lowest part of your bag. So not only does it fit with how you should pack, with all your weight down to the bottom, but it's one of the first items you can grab. And the tent poles, turn my pack over, and I just stick them to the side. Make sure you strap down. So let's talk about the clothing we need. Depending on whether you're camping in summer, winter, fall, that all depends on what you're going to bring. So you also want to check your forecast to make sure it's not going to rain, snow, whatever else, because that'll also depend on whether you're going to be bringing weatherproof pants, weatherproof jacket, and also a rain jacket. I typically bring on every single hike a lightweight shirt, long sleeve. My base layer is probably one of the things that doesn't matter where I'm going. I'm going to take it. It provides UV protection if I'm in the desert or even on a mountain. It helps protect, keep me warm. And the other thing too is it wicks if I were to get wet. That's the other thing, is you want to make sure your material matches where you're going. This is a wool base layer. You can also get synthetic, and you can also get silk. So the reason why I bring wool is it keeps me warm and it wicks well. The one thing you don't want to bring is cotton. So this is a cotton shirt. I'm not saying that you can't hike in cotton. Mountaineers say cotton kills, and that's because when you get wet in cotton, it doesn't dry easy, and it also keeps you wet, thus making you colder. So just make sure you're buying a base layer that is fitting the needs of what you're doing. Besides doing a base layer, you also want to have long underwear. This isn't something I will bring every time, but if the temperature drops below 50, I'm bringing this. This keeps me warm at night. It adds to the temperature that my bag will keep me at. I usually don't hike in it unless it's going to get below 20, but it's a good thing to have extra. Underwear, always keep that just in case. As far as the top though, I will occasionally bring a mid layer. That'll keep me warm on some of those colder days. And you have jackets. So you can get a plethora of different types of jackets. You have synthetic, you have down. They both kind of operate the same way the bag does, so I'm not going to cover that. I covered that earlier. But then you also have wool jackets as well. I usually bring a jacket like this. It provides good weather resistance. It also keeps me warm. And it's easy to shed layers if I need to quickly. You can also bring a rain jacket as well. But when we're talking about weight, the more clothes you bring, the heavier it's going to be. I tend to bring one pair of pants. When I hike in the same pair of pants for 3 or 4 days, and I always use wool socks as well. Wool's great. I love wool. Keeps your feet warmer. If your socks get wet one day, change them out for another pair of socks. Socks and underwear are the two things that I will make sure that I have extras of. Everything else, I usually bring one thing of if it's 1 to 2 days. As far as other clothes that you might bring, buff. I love bringing a buff. It adds great UV protection whenever it's hot out or I'm in snow. The other thing it does is it can be a great mat for whenever you're setting up stoves and what else to keep it off the ground. It also keeps you warm, keeps dirt out of your face too if you're, say, in a windstorm. Something else I bring are gloves. Depending on the weather, usually anything below 50, 60, I'll bring gloves at night because your hands do get a little cold, especially when you're setting up your stove and your campsite. And something that I always recommend is a beanie. About 40% to 45% of your heat is lost to your head. If you want to stay warm, a beanie is probably the lightest way to stay warm. That and your core. If you start getting cold hands, warm up your core. That'll keep your hands warm, and then also that beanie will keep your head from shedding all that heat. And I usually put extra clothes on top. That way it's easy to access, and also it usually stays a bit dry. And if I need to, I can just put it away quickly. So now that we have all of our material stuff, we're going to start talking about water. Now, this is probably going to be one of the most important things you have outside of your material gear, because a lot of people have different ideas and ways that they carry water. You need about half a liter per every hour of strenuous activity. So if you're hiking for 6 hours, you need at least 3 liters of water. A lot of bladders cover that 3 liter. And so those are a great way to keep everything that you'll need, but you probably will also need to filter water when you get to your campsite. Other ways of carrying water are going to be Nalgene's or even water bottles. If this is your first time hiking and you don't want to spend extra money on Nalgene's or bladders, buying water bottles works. And then also some of the filters actually fit to certain water bottles. And this is actually the filter I recommend. There's 3 main types: a drip filter, a squeeze filter, and a pump filter. The thing about this filter, the Sawyer, is that it's only about $20. You can attach it to the top of your pouch after getting water and drink straight from it. Or you can drip it, or you can spray it back into your Nalgene. So many different ways to use this $20. I recommend buying this over anything else just based on price alone. However, if you are camping with large groups, pump filters are great. They're bigger, they're heavier, but the amount of water you get from this is so much more. And it's also very easy to use. You don't have to bend over and get water every 2 seconds to spray out. You just leave this on the ground, pump water into your Nalgene, and you're good to go. As far as having your water that you're carrying and, say, your water you're filtering, another option is to grab 1 liter of water, and then if you're by a water source, say a river, continuously fill it up, filter it, drink it. A lot of people save weight based on that alone. 1 3-liter thing of water is about 8.5 pounds. So you're going to be bringing a lot of weight just based on water. This is one way to cut down. The problem is if you're not near a water source, you're risking not having water, which is also something I don't recommend. If you're not carrying your water and say your filter's broken and you come to a source of water, I always have a backup. One of those backups is a UV pen. You can also have a life straw or iodine tablets. The UV pen works just by sticking it in a water bottle, letting it go for a little bit, and it sterilizes that water. Life straw, we've all seen those. A third option is iodine tabs with neutralizing tabs. The way that works is you stick the iodine in there. I recommend buying the neutralizing tabs because drinking iodine water alone is horrible. I've done it before. It's really difficult to get water in you and it tastes like metal. The other thing that I'd recommend when it comes to water is know where your water sources are. When you're on a trip and you know you're going to run out of water, probably at the campsite, make sure you know where the water sources are around that campsite so you can always have water. That's probably one of the biggest things when it comes to hiking, is knowing where to get your water from, and then also how to filter it and how to sanitize it. So since this is going to be one of the things that I'll have just above my clothes, because I'll be filtering water somewhat regularly, is I tend to either stick it on the top or within the brain. And I've had this filter for about 2 years. That's about the life of it. I need to get a new one. So just remember, always check your filter, always clean it. Make sure that you clean it regularly, because whenever you get some stuff in there, it's gonna be super hard to filter it out when it's clogged. And I'll put my bladder in the nice little compartment in the back. Okay, our pack is mostly full, but we have some other stuff to talk about and what to use. Let's talk about food. I tend to actually use a lot of granola bars, protein bars, beef jerky, nuts are great, nutter butter is great, all are lightweight, high in protein, good fats. You can also bring sandwiches, and one of my favorites is tortillas with cream cheese and salami. You have your proteins, you have your carbs, you have your fats. It's all lightweight, it's all compact, and it'll last you a couple days. We also have mountain houses. Backpacker's Pantry is another one. Heather's Choice is another great food option. You can also do that. You just need a stove, but stoves are also great for cooking coffee, hot chocolate, oatmeal, whatever else you need. The 2 recommendations I have are either using a Jetboil or the MSR Pocket Rocket. Both for 2 different reasons. I like the MSR Pocket Rocket because it's so small, it's compact, and it's lightweight. So that's great. You just also need to bring pots with that. The great thing about the Solo Stove, though, is that everything is compact into it. That includes your lighter, a stand, and you have your stove. So the benefits of the Jetboil, I think, are that not only is it compact and you can basically fit everything in there, you can even fit a smaller canister of gas in there. It also saves on gas. Although the Pocket Rocket is great and it works phenomenally, you'll be using a little bit more gas, and so you'll need more. It's really your choice on what you want. This is $30. This is $80. You'll need $10 worth of pots with this as well. So this is great for being inexpensive and small. This is great for efficiency. And it's easy to set up. The other thing I'd also want to touch on too when it comes to food, I also really like oatmeal. And so you can also do cold oatmeal or hot. If you do cold, just stick it in a bottle overnight, put some water in there. And I also add protein powder to it as well, and peanut butter. That way you have your fats, you have your proteins, and you have your carbs in there as well. When it comes to sleeping at night, I always recommend having a heavy protein meal because that's delayed calories that is digested while you sleep. If you need energy quick, I also recommend sugar. I will definitely say a Snicker bar is great, or gummy worms, whatever you're hungry for. I think that that's probably one of the biggest problems most hikers have, is finding stuff they're hungry for in the middle of nowhere. You'll find out that you won't be that hungry when you're exhausted, you're tired, you're cold. You still need to eat though. So find stuff you're hungry for. Even if you're trying to lose weight, you're not going to have the energy to get back or get there if you're not eating. So find stuff you're hungry for. That is such a key thing I can't stress anymore. So when it comes to food, you can either put it in the top compartment, or I put it in the top of the brain as well. I also recommend always bringing a trash bag because you don't want to have these messy type of cooked foods that have food still on them in your bag. So I always recommend a trash bag to bring as well. Don't forget the stove as well. I once actually got to my campsite. It was 20 degrees. I brought a ton of cold food, or a ton of warm food, because I didn't want to be cold all night. And I forgot my lighter. Always check for your lighter. And the other thing I also recommend is having an extra lighting source in your bag. MSR makes a very fun little stick. You press, it creates a little spark, and you can start your stove using that. So now that our main compartment is full, let's talk about something else we'll bring, a light source. Now, I tend to bring a headlamp, but you can also bring a flashlight or even a tent light, one that you hang at the top of your tent, just to keep your little space nice and lit. The things to look at when it comes to headlamps are going to be lumen output. That's basically a candle. So 200 lumens, 200 candles. The other thing you're going to look for too is weight, the size, the cost. Cost is very important. And then as well as the features. My first headlamp was a Coast. I loved it. It was great. It's lightweight, only about 20 bucks, 200 lumens. That's great. However, almost all of my Coasts broke within 6 months. Some were easy to fix, others weren't. The other option is, say, a Black Diamond. My Black Diamond light has not gone out once. I've changed out the batteries a few times. It's very sturdy. It's lightweight. It's about twice the expense. So if you're on a budget, this is a good starter. If you really want to spend the extra money, go with that. Another option is also flashlights. I even have a flashlight that I use as a hanging tent light as well. Always have a backup light. You can use your phone, but your phone is more important for navigation, in my opinion, because it's only got about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on your battery life, of light left. And that could be a really good SOS if you do get lost. So although your phone works, I wouldn't stick with that. Always have a backup light. Something else to cover with lights too is the features. Usually all of them will point down and up. The thing that I haven't gotten yet that I really, really want is a locker for your on-off switch. The reason why I want something to lock that is all these have turned on at different times in my bag, and there's nothing worse than getting to your campsite and having your headlamp already out, which is why I recommend having extra batteries in your emergency kit, which we will talk about later. So let's pack that away, and I usually put that in my hip belt. The next thing we need to talk about is navigation. This should probably be one of the more important topics, and it's something that we can go into major depth later. But as far as the materials you would need, I always recommend a physical map. You can get Green Trails maps at almost any of your outdoor stores. You can also print one offline, and a road atlas typically will have maps of the area as well. But they're not useful unless you know how to use them, so learn up on that a little bit. Another option is also to get your phone, and your phone can download different apps such as Gaia, Backcountry, Google Maps is great. However, they're not always easy to utilize. Usually you have to download the map before you go there. So if you say get to a trailhead and you don't have service and you forgot to download that map, you're pretty hosed. So it's good to have either your map working on your phone or having a backup is great as well. Another option is also to have a Garmin InReach. They're expensive. I really don't want to go into that right now because there's also a subscription fee and it's sometimes very difficult to use. But as far as a go-to, Garmin InReach is the one that you want to use. If you don't want to spend that extra $400 and subscription fee, I would say the best tool is actually someone who's done it before. As far as a map or a phone, someone who knows that, it's lightweight, they know what they're doing, you're going to get there, you're going to get out, they know the area. I'd say a guide is probably your best bet when it comes to navigation, but we can't all have that. So stick with your map, stick with your phone. Your phone can die. That's why a physical map is better. And that's also why I don't recommend using your phone as a flashlight unless you absolutely need to and you know the trailhead is just down the way. As far as sun protection, there's a few things that we can use. One is eyes. If you're on a snowfield, you know how blinding that snow can be. Always have sunglasses, and I always use those on desert hikes as well. The other thing is sunscreen. Make sure you have sunscreen with you, protection, and then clothes. I already covered that. UV protection in your clothes is also key. These two can go. Hip belt as well. Reason why I put sunglasses and sunscreen on my hip belt is that usually you don't apply sunscreen until you realize you need it. So I tend to have it easily accessible, as well as my sunglasses, because there are times when you're in a forest, it's dark, you don't need it, you pop out, you're blinded. So always have your sunglasses and sunscreen easily accessed. The final few things that we want to talk about are going to be first aid, your tools, and then your emergency backup. This is something I would always recommend bringing a first aid kit. I usually bring this little guy for, say, day hikes or easy overnights. My medical kit I'll bring on, say, mountaineering or rock climbing. This one's a lot bigger. It has more tools to it, but the basics are usually the same. So in this, I have water purifier, like I told you earlier, Advil Tylenol. I have an emergency blanket. I always mock people who bring these, and then I got stuck in a situation where I needed it. And so I don't mock people anymore because these things are awesome for emergency shelters, keeping you warm. If you get injured, an emergency blanket is actually really key. If you're cold and you get hurt, hypothermia is actually worse for you because you can't move. And injured hikers and climbers tend to get hypothermia quicker. So always have an emergency blanket on you. I have gauze, medication, Band-Aids, moleskins. I like hiking through. I love moving. The one thing that'll stop me before anything else is a blister or a medical thing. If I start feeling like I might need to take care of a blister on my foot, take care of that immediately. If I start feeling like I might need Benadryl, keep that at hand because those things will hit you quick and slow you down more so than stopping and treating them. That'll usually go in the top compartment because you never know when someone can get hurt. My medical kit is key, but some people will intertwine that with their emergency kit. Basically the same thing. What I have in here, I'll bring most places. Eyeglass containers or contact containers are great for holding medicine or something small that you might need. I also have backup sunscreen in here. I have Quick Clot. I'll usually put any type of backup that I might need, batteries as well in here. And then I also have my toiletry kit. I have glasses in here. I have contacts because I am blind, which sucks. If you're not blind, you'll still need a toothbrush, toothpaste, anything you might need as far as toiletry goes in here as well. And those also should be easily accessible, usually in the top compartment. Okay, the last few items that I want to talk about, which I wouldn't say are key and I don't bring on every single trip, are going to be a knife, a multi-tool, or any sort of type of tape. Things that fix, repair. You don't need it on every trip. I would say that I use my knife 1 in every 10, and I would say that I use my multi-tool 1 in every 5. I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary, but it does help. It's lightweight. And these are actually the two that I bring the most. I have a micro Leatherman and a small knife. Super lightweight, easy, accessible. I don't use my Swiss Army knife that often when I bring it, and it's pretty heavy. But you can find small Leathermans that are very useful. Gerber also makes some great brands as well. And those can either go in your front pouch or your hip belt as well. Let's talk about your shoes. Most trails, you probably need some ankle support or some water protection or rock protection. Some trails you can get away with just tennis shoes, but I always recommend having probably quarter-sized ankle guards or even full. You can do just regular tennis shoes depending on the trail and height. However, if you're going up, make sure you have good ankle support. The other thing to also be aware of too is if you're hiking in new shoes, make sure you've walked in them before. New shoes form blisters so easily. You want to make sure that those shoes fit you because you're going to be wearing them for 2 days, 3 days sometimes. And if you're wearing new shoes that give you blisters, that's going to ruin the whole trip. So make sure that you've worn them a few times around town, to the store, work, wherever, just break them in. You also don't want to rash around your ankle as well from the rubbing. Another thing to also keep in mind too is water protection. You want to make sure that if you do step in a puddle, your shoes aren't going to be wet all day because that's going to be miserable, or sticking your feet in wet shoes from the night before is also very uncomfortable. Something that I also bring too around camp, I'm actually wearing right now, little foam sandals. Lightweight, easy to put on, Crocs work great, but it's also extra weight, it's extra stuff to pack. Not absolutely necessary, but a good backup in case these two fail. The other thing to also make sure is you have good rock protection. If you're going to be kicking steps and roots as you go up, you want to have the front of your feet pretty well protected. You don't need steel toe boots. The other thing to remember too is weight. I keep talking about weight, but for every pound on your foot, it's 5 pounds on your back, according to the US military. So just make sure that you're taking lightweight shoes that fit you well, have good protection, when it comes to the front, and then also ankle protection up top, and it's waterproof. I cannot stress waterproof enough. It's so miserable having cold feet. That's why we have extra socks though. However, we're not packing those are gonna be on our feet. But we do have to get our pack on. So now that we have our pack all packed up, let's put it on. I usually start with the shoulder that has my hydration bladder, so I'm not moving that all around. It's not twisting underneath me. I usually start with that. Shoulder first. I also want to make sure that my pack is fitted to myself. You can do that in store when you purchase it or do it at home. Just make sure you're not adjusting it on trail. That takes forever and it's somewhat uncomfortable. And once your pack is on, the other thing to focus on is how to distribute the weight. You always want to have the weight around the hips. So I start with the hip belt, tighten it down. I know that it's set. I also start with the top straps to make sure it's lined up with my back. That way it's not wobbling around everywhere. If it's lined up with your back, you shouldn't have a lot of pressure on your collarbone. You should make sure that that's free and it's comfortable. You should also make sure that when you strap in, it's not going anywhere. Basically, you move around freely. It's just another attachment to yourself. No weights on your shoulders, most of the weight's on the hips, but it's attached to you firmly. And I think we're ready to hike. Thank you everyone for watching. If you have any gear recommendations or advice that I didn't include, put that in the comments below. That'll help anyone viewing this. It'll also give them ideas of what else to get. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Also hit that bell for notifications. You know you want to see more of me. Also get out there, explore, have fun. Thank you everyone for watching.